everybody, and welcome. This is episode 361 of Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Network, and this will probably just be colloquially known as the Devin Williams trade episode. Lots of discussion and questions about that. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, we got Paul and Ryan here this weekend. The gang's all back together. Paul, how's your weekend been?
Going pretty well. Nice low-key weekend. We've had a lot of travel lately, a lot of other stuff. And this one, we're just doing normal, everyday stuff, cleaning up, getting Christmas wrapping, whatnot done, playing kids soccer, all the normal. This is good. Packers are tonight, even have a Sunday free today. So what could be better?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the Badgers won yesterday. Unfortunately, Liverpool in the morning drew at home to a not great team, but that was because they played like 85 minutes with 10 men. So that was just unfortunate, and at least they drew because they were behind a couple times. So that could have been worse, but it still wasn't great. So, yeah. But we had friends over last night, and we made chicken saltimbocca. I don't know if you've had that before, but it turned out really good. I got very pleased with the recipe that I used there. So that was good. Some saffron rice. It was nice. It was good stuff. Yeah.
Nice. Good time with friends this weekend. Absolutely. Especially with the dreary weather, at least here in Madison. Hard to do anything outside. I got back from a week-long vacation in New Orleans. So coming back and having it be, high of like 8 degrees this past week was not fun. Picked the wrong week to go down there. But back this week, and good timing too, because lots of Brewers news to get to. But first, some business off the top for those of you who aren't patrons yet. A reminder, I should say, patreon.com/MKE Tailgate is where you can sign up. $2 a month guarantees you get your questions answered both on this podcast and on Reporting as Eligible, Paul's Packers podcast. While the $5 level gets you the question priority plus the additional exclusive content, including the minor league extra with Ryan and Spencer, as well as Paul's Reporting as Eligible mini pods. Ryan, you and Spencer are planning to record the latest minor league extra this week. What are you planning on?
Yeah, it's going to be this week, and we are going to be drafting the 2028 Brewers opening day roster. We talked about this a little bit on last week's episode, but yeah, that'll be the meat of the episode. We were drafting guys who are going to be on the opening day roster in 2028. So using Baseball America's handy little that's always what they do is 4 years out. They project, what the team is going to look like at that point. So we're going to draft who is most likely to be on that roster, which I started this with James last year. So it was very fun. So
it was like a fun episode. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Paul, Packers out in Seattle, Sunday night game, as you mentioned, kind of easy for some to overlook. I know you guys talked about it a little bit on the main pod, but kind of a tough matchup, and going to Seattle is always hard.
Seattle's a little underrated right now. They've been dynamite since their bye. They've actually had the best defense in football. Their bye was week 10, so small sample, and they haven't played really a murderer's row, but when they started that bye, Arizona in their division was in first place. They'd been on a big tear, and Seattle just totally dominated them twice in 3 weeks, took them completely out. They did have Aaron Rodgers in there, so their defense is juiced a little bit because of that. But this is never easy to play in Seattle. The Packers haven't won there in like 8 years or something like that. Maybe longer. Time has no meaning for me anymore. But yeah, it's not going to be an easy one. It'll be an interesting one to watch.
Absolutely. All right. Turning to the Brewers, though. Devin Williams, gone. As we mentioned off the top, we all pretty much, I think, assumed that Devin would be traded this winter. It ended up happening just a little bit after the winter meetings wrapped up. So you have to think the Brewers and Yankees probably spent some time during the winter meetings trying to hash this out. He'll be headed to the Yankees in a deal that saw both teams basically deal from positions of depth to address a need. I saw a good old-fashioned baseball trade thrown around a couple of times. So major leaguers for major leaguers, basically. Brewers get, of course, Nestor, Cortes, and minor league infielder Caleb Durbin in return. Cortes, kind of a fan favorite in New York, dealt with some injuries in 2023, but outside of that season, he's been a very effective starter in that really tough AL East with some, subpar swing and miss stuff. Changes speeds a lot, changes deliveries sometimes in the same at bat. He's a lot of fun to watch in that regard. But he's sort of Wade Miley-ish, and I know I'm not the only one that really drew that comparison, but lefty that really, really outperforms his peripherals for his career. So if you want to think of this as your Wade Miley replacement in the rotation, that's probably the best way to do it. He's got a 3.80 career ERA and averages 4.08 runs allowed per 9 innings, but a career DRA of 4.88. See, I made sure to include the RA per 9 for you, Jonathan, there when comparing to DRA. Durbin, though, is kind of built as a utility guy, but he's built like a bulldog. I want to say he's 5'6", which we'll get to that in a minute. But it looks like he spends plenty of time in the gym. I believe Eric Longenhagen called him a size extra small Tyler O'Neill, which I just absolutely love.
Yeah.
His contact rate and speed are his best tools, obviously, but he's not a top 30 prospect in the Yankees system. Feels kind of like a high floor player. But at least I think he could be, an upgrade at the utility spot over Andrew Monasterio. Point being, now we've had a few days to think about this deal. I think it's fair to be a little bummed that maybe the Brewers didn't get a better prospect in this deal. But, if you look at it in terms of dealing from a position of strength to a position of need, the Brewers really, really needed an innings eater type in the starting rotation. They could have used an upgrade at utility guy too. So I think in that scope, it makes sense. But I guess, Paul, what are your feelings about this deal overall?
I'm not a big fan of it. And I guess Devin Williams, I had tempered my expectations. They don't have control of him for very long at this point. And so I kind of get it, because in terms of pure value, I think they actually both had 2.6 WAR last year. And, Nestor is a starter, and Devin is not. Obviously, that's a little bit different, but the Packers, still in reporting as eligible mode a little bit. The Brewers did have a need here, and they weren't going to have Devin, so it's fine in that. By the way, Wade Miley comp actually looks even better when you look at the innings pitched of Nestor Cortes over the last 4 years, because it's like he pitched 93, then 158, then 63, then 174. So
right.
Very Wade Miley like in that instance too. But Durbin, man, like in terms of getting a prospect back, height's one of the first things I look at. I do it in football too. Like a couple of years ago, the Commanders, no, he got traded there. I think it might have been the Eagles or Commanders, whatever, drafted Jahan Dotson, who's a receiver from Philadelphia. And just, if you're doing spreadsheets, one of the easiest things to do is just filter on height. Jahan Dotson was like 5'6", a familiar number. There aren't any good 5'6" receivers. There's like 2 ever. It's like, I can't remember. There's one really fast guy who played for a long time. Joey Galloway, it's not him though, somebody else. But there's, since 1961, which is one of the things that I think it's the modern era in baseball, there's 21 Major League Baseball players who are 5'6" or less. That's it. That's all. And almost all of them played 40 years ago, and almost all of them are terrible. Jose Altuve is the only one who's any good at all. He is number 1 on this list with a bullet. The only other one in sort of the somewhat recent era who was any good at all was David Eckstein, who, we all kind of made fun of for being a tiny grinder, and who was like a Fire Joe Morgan legend more than anything else. So, like, your odds are very, very bad of having him work out. Just 5'6" guys just don't have the physical leverage to do a lot of things properly, to throw hard, to generate it's just very difficult to do. So it just seems like a waste. He seems like a novelty. If he works out, great. I'm sure Brewer fans will love having a short guy who can play well. But like after Altuve, who slugged 468 for his career, the next highest slugging on this list is 365 from Walt Williams, who played in 1964 to 1975.
Yeesh.
Yeah, right. So I don't like the trade because I feel like that guy's a waste. And whatever. I'd rather have angry Devin Williams still on my team, I think, probably.
Yeah, so this kind of cuts both directions, because in some ways this is like the most Brewers trade possible, because as Jeffrey Paternoster said, and I won't use the swear he did because we haven't gone over that line yet, but he is the most effing Brewers player ever, referring to Durbin. And he also called him a Yankees psyop, so that kind of backs up what
I like
you're saying,
that. Yeah,
that they
pump
had
and dump scheme. I heard that one too
Yeah,
because he was
Yeah, I
big.
saw that
Yeah,
out there. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there is that. I want to return to Cortes first though, because the Cortes thing is really weird, and this is not what the Brewers usually do with players like Devin Williams. Normally, look at what they did last year when they got when they traded for Corbin Burns. They got two guys with 6+ years of control in DL Hall and in Joey Ortiz, and then they also got the draft pick, which is, you know, a guy who presumably will have another 6 years of control or whatever, you know. So they traded for a ton of control. When they got Josh Hader, yes, they did have included in that deal some short-term relievers, but there was some money stuff there, and that was just like trying to paper over the cracks of, you know, what you were losing with Hader and whatever in that deal. But the most important pieces in that deal were Ruiz and were Gasser, right? So that's normally what they do, is they hunt control. So going after Nestor Cortes is extremely interesting because it's different, and it, I think, demonstrates that their priority is this year, right? Like, you don't do that deal without valuing highly this season and saying, yeah, we're trying to win this year. We had a real need in the rotation, as James pointed out. He is innings, we hope, because we haven't talked yet about we haven't talked yet about the problem that he had a forearm.
The end of last year, yeah.
He had a forearm problem at the end of last year that kept him out of the first couple rounds of the playoffs. When he came back, he was the guy who got brought in and he gave up the grand slam to Freddie Freeman, which, like, that I had people at work were like, oh, we got the guy who gave up that. Like, okay, that doesn't really matter, except that
Devin Williams did. It's fine.
Yeah, Devin Williams did the same thing, but like, what is concerning is the fact that he had a forearm flexor issue, right, and that is very often a precursor to Tommy John. And since you've just got 1 year of Nestor Cortes, if he has to have Tommy John, if he shows up, like, nobody should be surprised if he shows up to spring training next year and is, you know, ends up making a trip to see Dr. Neil Elatrash in March or April or anytime, really. Like, nobody should be surprised, because those forearm flexor issues are often precursors to Tommy John. So that part is scary. I mean, I assume they looked at the medicals and they were satisfied that there wasn't anything obvious. So they did their due diligence there and whatever. So I'm sure this isn't just like crossing your fingers and hoping. They've gone and done some investigation here. But it is still a little bit concerning that, like, that primary piece in that way is, you know, that iffy, and you only get him for 1 year. So we'll see. I mean, they could theoretically also, I believe he is still arbitration, like, his arbitration situation still has to be settled.
Yep.
So they have to deal with that. And there's another piece of this that we didn't talk about, which was, so he was projected at $7.7 million, which coincidentally is the exact same number, $7.7 million, that Devin Williams was projected for.
Yeah.
But the Brewers also got $2 million from the Yankees, which we have a question coming about that, so I can kind of save that a little bit. But there was also the $2 million. At first it was reported as 4.5. I saw it reported as 4.5 elsewhere. But
yeah, that was Nightingale. He's wrong.
Yeah.
You know.
That'll happen.
It will.
So, yeah, but the Durbin thing, as I'm talking here, I really haven't known what I thought of this deal. I've been kind of going back and forth on it. I think as I'm talking and as I'm listening to you, Paul, and as I'm going through this, I'm becoming more negative about the deal too, because the Durbin thing is, you're relying on him to get basically all of the long-term value out of this. Now, it could be that Cortes has a fantastic season like he did in, you know, the last couple of years, and that things go well and they actually come out well ahead on this, and it could work out that way. But Durbin he is a utility player, and I hope that we're not going to see him at third base, but we have more about that coming. So leave some of that on the table.
And I don't want to get ahead of that either, but a lot of the reports I've seen on him are that he can't really hold down shortstop. Like, that's not, he can stand there and do it, but, you know, for the specific Brewer current infield makeup, it's maybe not ideal, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, it's really an arm question. He has a 45 arm.
Yeah.
That's that.
Yep.
I think he can actually field the position. I think he can field both at short and third from a perspective. He's not Tyler Black over there who's going to, not have the agility or whatever. And there's some questions that way. I think he can do it. It's a question of then once he gets the ball, can he get it to first base with sort of a fringe arm? And that's more of an issue. So he's more of a utility guy in that way than he is I don't think you'd want him playing full time at short or third because he just doesn't really have the arm for the left side of the infield. Not the way the Brewers prioritize defense.
Nope. David Exton had the same problem with the Cardinals.
Yes, he did.
He did have that.
I think real quick before we get to the Patreon questions on this one too, something maybe to consider long-term is yes, Cortes is basically a 1-year rental, but he's also somebody where maybe you don't mind offering the qualifying offer next winter. I know Matt Trueblood at Brewer Fanatic just posted something about this too, where if you want to maybe spin this to think about a future draft pick, you could maybe do that. But again, that's dependent on if his elbow stays intact through the entire year, which as you mentioned is kind of a gamble. But that's a long-term consideration. I don't think you can really consider that when you're trying to evaluate this deal right now, but it's something to think about in the years to come.
Yeah, and you don't worry about elbows for long-term. If they came in and said, hey, we've agreed to a 3-year extension with Nestor Cortes, that would make, and I liked the terms on it, that would make this quite a different consideration, and I would go, oh, okay, because now you've got some time there that even if you do end up with a Tommy John situation, most guys come back from Tommy John fully. So even if that happens, okay, we lost a year in there, year and change or whatever, right, but we're probably okay long term. That would be very different in my mind than just a one and done. But yes, the qualifying offer is a real thing. And also, before we go on, I do want to say welcome to anybody who's listening new for the first time because of our new association with Brewer Fanatic. If you're hearing this, you saw that it was posting over there now. We are going to be doing some stuff with them, kind of informal collaboration with them. But part of that is our podcast is going to be going up over on that website over there. So in addition to the Spencer and Jack podcast, you also get our podcast over there as well. So to our new listeners, welcome. We appreciate you.
Yep, indeed, welcome. All right, let's turn to the Patreon questions because we've got a lot. A lot of people have a lot of questions about this. First, we'll start with Ryan Ziegler, who's writing, I'm finally coming across the baseball side of the Patreon. So welcome to this side, Ryan. Does the Devin Williams trade end up a little bit like Josh Hader? It stings up front, but ends up being totally fine and probably a benefit in the end. Paul, I think you maybe touched on this in your general feelings, but what do you think?
It's probably not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things just because individual relief pitchers, even great ones, aren't a big deal in the grand scheme of things. And Devin failed at the worst possible times over the course of his Brewer career. Now, going forward, if he continues to pitch at a high level, he probably won't do that again. He probably won't punch a wall again. And the odds of him getting hit up for big hits in the playoffs is actually pretty low. Mariano Rivera pitched in the playoffs a zillion times, and even he wasn't perfect in them. But the Brewers are really good at making relief pitchers, and they probably will backfill this position just fine. And in the grand scheme of things, it probably won't hurt them that much. I think the big thing that I have a complaint about here is just the return on this didn't seem as good as it maybe should have. But, the team will probably be okay. Devin's great. By the way, there's not a lot in his profile to indicate that he would be getting worse. Josh Hader was a little different in that respect. And he's been off and on fine too in his post-Brewer time. But when we got rid of him, he was looking like he might not be that good anymore. That's not the case with Devin. Devin's peripherals all still look pretty good. Everything about his profile still looks pretty good. But yeah, it's just a relief pitcher. There's only so good they can be. The Brewers have a lot of them. The Brewers are good at making them. They'll be fine.
Yeah, you could see him sort of having a K-Rod second half of his career, though, because the way that K-Rod went, when he lost a few ticks on the fastball, we got those years in 2013 13, 14, 15 in that era, that version of K-Rod where he really was the 30 pitches of terror, you could see that coming for Williams. Like once he loses a few ticks on the fastball and guys don't have to respect the that quite as much, and they can sit change up a little bit more, that can probably kind of knock down the effectiveness of that pitch a little bit. So you could sort of see it going that way. But ultimately, the deal was they weren't going to be re-signing Devin Williams. They weren't going to be giving him, because he's going to be seeking Josh Hader money, which is basically 5 for $20 million a year. That's what he's going to be seeking next year, and he should, because he's, by the way, so Mariano Rivera has like a 205 career OPS or ERA plus. You know what Devin's is for his career?
No.
233.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's historically good.
Yeah, he is historically good at run prevention. And when we traded Hader, he had already started to show, like, he had some ups and downs. Devin really hasn't had that outside of, that pitch to Pete Alonso.
Right.
Like, so, yeah, but you're still just trading 1 year of a guy. You're trading 1 year of him. And so the value isn't going to be even as much as like the Josh Hader trade, because the Josh Hader trade was, you were trading him for 2 pennant chases, right? You're trading in the
year
middle
and a
of
half
the year.
total, yeah.
Yeah. This is gonna play out differently than that because of just like the return is so different from what the Josh Hader trade was. Like, just the players are very different. But I think if you end up with Durbin becoming a solid guy who can sort of contribute in different ways and is more of a 300 to like 450 plate appearance a year guy, instead of being relied on a lot, especially early here before we see like what he is, I think that also is probably a better role for him than trying to shoehorn him into an everyday. He could be a very useful utility, but that also has just sort of limited value in and of itself. So, yeah.
Next question is Lucoy's Suitcase asking, do you think the Brewers keep Nestor Cortes? Are there any interesting things the Brewers could do to help him improve if they do keep him? So I've seen this floated around. Do the Brewers maybe flip Cortes for something else? I don't think so, because they desperately need that starting rotation spot, and you're not going to find anything better than him on the free agent market for that price. But Paul, I guess, could the pitching lab do some wonders even in just a year?
So maybe yes. Okay. First of all, the answer is yes, because that's what the Brewers do. They don't pick up guys that they can't alter slightly. I do think it's worth noting, though, that when Nestor Cortes has been fully healthy, he has been very good already, and he is, a mix and match pitcher, which is a little different. This isn't an instance where like a guy's throwing 99 and the Brewers are just changing an arm angle and generating more spin on a slider or something. This is a guy with a big arsenal already. So maybe the thought process here is more, you throw 4 pitches, we can accentuate a couple of those. Maybe you throw those a little bit more. And he might be a guy who's willing to actually take feedback a little more willingly than a lot of other pitchers do. Not that they've had a lot of stinks in the pitching lab, but it's just when it's not a guy with like a raw, like great tool that they can like craft to their will. It's more a guy who's already crafty, who they can maybe teach a few things to. So yeah, they will. They do work with everybody, but he's a little unusual for that too. Like the Wade Miley comp I think is informative here. I don't think of Wade Miley as a pitching lab guy. I feel like Wade Miley is just a crafty old guy already, who I'm sure does get some refinements from upstairs and implement them. And that's kind of what you're looking at here. Same kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree with that, and he's not a guy that the pitching lab is going to do a massive overhaul on, right? Like this is not going to be like, oh, we've pulled one weird trick and now he's great. But maybe they can sort of improve around the fringes. Maybe I'm sure they have suggestions for, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about maybe some slight tweaks to the stuff? Usually with the Brewers, it's often some slight tweaks or maybe even major tweaks to the pitch mix. Like throw this more, throw this less, shelve this. Have you thought about changing this grip this way? Those sorts of things. So they probably can. But if you get in 2022, he was worth 3.7 WAR. In 2024, he was worth 3.1. he missed time in 2023, that year he was worth 0.9. But if you get a season like 22 or 24 out of him, if that does happen, I think you're sort of immediately coming out ahead. And then Durbin almost does become like, oh, well, I guess that's the like whatever happens with him is gravy. Like that's the cherry on top. So like there is a lot of potential here for Cortes to be extremely valuable. But going back to the question, because like, do you think they can keep Cortes? I kind of mentioned this already. I would be surprised if he would be willing to do an extension like what I just talked about, like the 3-year extension, because I don't know if you've noticed, but starting pitchers are getting bank this offseason. Like teams are just hucking money at them in kind of obscene ways. Like starting pitchers are getting paid. And so I would think if I was a guy like Nestor Cortes, I would go, I'm going to try to have a good year this year and then do that. I guess if they did do an extension, if Cortes did agree to an extension, I guess at that point I would kind of worry, oh, does he know his elbow is like hanging on by a thread and like he's going to need TJ? Yeah. And he's trying to get himself secure because if he gets, a 3-year deal, then he could, sort of work around that. So I would kind of worry about that at that point. But yeah, the idea of keeping Cortes long-term is interesting, but it's going to be kind of difficult to do because of just starting pitchers are getting paid. They really are.
Yeah, and very few starting pitchers have, compared to this free agent class, have as much WAR already compiled as Cortes does. He's been very, very good for the Yankees. And yeah, I think going back to the pitching lab question too, it's not like the Yankees are schlubs when it comes to pitching, Dev. Like they are one of the gold standards as well. So I feel like if there was something to be gained, they may have already gotten something out of him, which is not a bad thing. Then the Brewers benefits. Maybe they tweak it a little bit more, say throw your cutter more and your sweeper less or something like that, looking at his pitch values. But he's pretty much a refined product at this point, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Let's turn to the less refined product, Caleb Durbin. Lots of questions about him, as we referenced earlier. So these next two I'm going to take together just because it kind of they fit together, basically. Adam Post is asking, is Caleb Durbin just a shorter version of Sal Frelick, or does he have a better potential to actually impact the baseball? And JVT asking, is Caleb Durbin the player the Brewers always hoped Tyler Black would become? What comes next for a player like Tyler Black? Does he become a 4A guy? Do the Brewers sell low to help him find a home, or does he still have a valuable trait that's worth holding on to? Ryan, I saw, Durbin come back and I was like, oh, another Sal Frelick. And I think that kind of goes with the point you were mentioning of this is a very, very Brewers type player. Like they really love this profile. But I guess, what do you think? Obviously, does he have a higher ceiling than Frelick? And what does it mean for Tyler Black? Is he kind of crowded out at this point?
So Durbin is interesting in that he actually did hit for some power this year. In the regular season, he had 10 home runs, and then in the Arizona Fall League, which you have to take that with a big grain of salt because the Arizona Fall League is a place where guys go to hit for power. He hit another 5 home runs there. But I'm going to talk about something Matthew Trueblood wrote on the subject here. I want to make sure that it was Trueblood and not Jack. I'll double check in just a minute, but when I'm done talking about it. But one of them put a graph in an article that showed the difference between what Durbin does and what Frelick does. Both have lower end contact numbers off the bat. But what Durbin does differently is he does actually pull the baseball, which you will like, Paul. He does actually pull the baseball, and so that it allows him to get some extra base hits, kind of pulling baseballs down the line and towards the pull side, as opposed to being a spray the ball guy like Terang and Frelick. And so that part of it should work somewhat. He should be able to get some actual power because he does look to sting the baseball down the line and to pull it. And that's part of his profile. So even though he doesn't make as hard of contact, like his ability to elevate the ball and his ability to pull it are pretty decent. So that is a difference in terms of his profile with those guys. taking the other part of this, the Tyler Black part of it, I mean, no, I don't know here. The Durbin certainly has more defensive utility than Tyler Black does at this point. Like he actually, I think is going to be a very good second baseman, and I think he is a solid utility player who can play on the left side. You just don't want him there all the time because his arm is a liability over there. But like he's capable of picking it over there. So from that perspective, but I also still think that Tyler Black is a better hitter than Durbin. I think Tyler Black is going to impact the baseball more. It's just a problem of profile where he's not going to be able to offer the defensive utility and value that Durbin is. So the bar on his bat is higher because of that, right? He needs to be a much better hitter to be able to, be an impact player at the big league level. So it's sort of a sliding scale. It's not a perfect comp, but it is at least interesting from that perspective. And I don't know, where are you guys at? Do you think Tyler Black gets moved this offseason? I still think it's fairly likely that he ends up getting included in a deal for something else, that they make another move and Tyler Black is part of that, just because I don't see a clear path for him here.
If he doesn't get moved, it's because other teams aren't interested. I'm sure he's on the menu on every trade. Like, hey, would you also be interested in having Tyler Black along with? And it speaks to the trouble with his profile. It really does. There's not a lot of places for him to play, and the bat doesn't really play at the places where he can play. So, he's maybe an interesting project. And I don't think he'll be on the team because I think they will make every effort to get something for him. But the market for him is not going to be that big, so he might just end up sticking around. Sometimes that happens. Two other things I wanted to mention on Durbin before we get to more questions. First thing we should mention, he is fast. He does steal bases. That is also a weapon that we haven't touched on because we've been focusing on can you actually hit the ball. But he is, like all Brewer young players, a threat to steal bases. I'll be very interested to see what his percentage speed is once we have savant readings on him, which we don't yet. But his caught stealing to stealing ratio across his entire minor league profile is very good, which is a good sign. The other thing we should mention about him, as just like it's different than Frelick, but not different than all other Brewers, is he has reverse platoon splits.
Oh, no.
I didn't catch that.
Across all minor league levels, he slugs something like 800 plus against righties, which he is also a righty, and only about 650 against lefties. So keep an eye on that as well. That it really shows up in his pull profile. Actually, that's why I was going to echo you, Ryan. He definitely is less of a spray hitter than Sal is. Sal actually has almost no platoon splits because he just plunks the ball into short X field, whereas Durbin's at least trying to sting it a little bit. Yeah.
Well, there goes my idea of platooning him with Terang if Terang craters offensively.
Yep.
Yes, I want to just properly credit here. It was Jack Stern that had the spray chart and showed that he is more of a pull-oriented hitter. It was Jack, not Matt. So thank you.
Okay.
All right, next up, Michael Parr asking, do the Brewers still hunt for an infielder with pop, or is this it for third base? I like the acquisition of Durbin, but I would feel more comfortable if he is a Monasterio replacement rather than a starter. I feel like that's kind of where I am. This is hopefully where they see him. I don't think he's the third base solution, so to speak, Paul. They still have more work to do there.
They definitely should. One of the things, just going back to a previous question, they're well equipped to replace Devin Williams, an outstanding player. They're much less well equipped to replace Willy Adames and have not yet done so. That is not what this is. I think my big fear, and people who are smarter than me and better writers than me keep telling me this won't happen, but my big fear is just that they rotate the other way, that they play Durbin at second base, that they move Terang to shortstop, and they have Ortiz at third, because you could do that. That is a cromulent-looking Major League Baseball infield, and the Brewers, I could see getting to that spot and being like, okay, we're fine. We can mix and match our way to great defense and pitching and almost no runs and still make the playoffs. And so that is my great fear right now. But they should not do that. They need more pop in this lineup. This lineup's not very good right now. So I don't think they're done, but I have a fear at the back of my head that they might be done.
Yeah, I mean, this does take the pressure off of needing to do something. Like, they really needed to make a move, and they now have less of a need to do something. But I still think they need to do it, right? Like, it's a lesser
They need
need,
to do it.
but
They might think that, but they do.
I think it takes some of the pressure off of it. I could see a world, and I don't think that makes sense, because there's been a lot of talk of that, because you're basically downgrading like 3 positions that way. You're making like downgrades at 3 positions. If you're gonna like the sane thing to do here would be Terang at second, where he is an all-world, like literally a platinum glove defender at second base.
Platinum glove. Yep.
Joey Ortiz at shortstop, where he is, we think, going to be solidly above average to maybe very well above average in terms of short, because he actually has the hose to play short and play on the left side.
Yeah.
And then if you're going to take a hit defensively someplace, with, say, a platoon of like, I don't know, Dunn and Durbin at third base, well, you could kind of hide the arm over there a little bit in terms of, because Dunn is actually a good defender at third base, so you have that. And you mix and match and figure out how to make it work best over there, ride some hot streaks, whatever, to do that. Like, that seems like a much more rational solution to me to this than trying to like slide everybody around and make every position worse defensively and offensively. So I don't think they're too smart to do that. Unless there's like emergency injury situations, I don't think we're going to see like Bryce Terang slide over to short, because he just doesn't have the hose for it. Like, he just doesn't. So that would be bad, and I'm fingers crossed that doesn't happen. I think the like I said, I just laid out, like, I think is the actual kind of worst case scenario for what they would do if they don't get the third baseman that they are hoping to get.
Yeah, I think it's an option, especially, mid-season random game in July. Fine. Like, you can live with it, but it shouldn't be your long-term solution. Devin Bearwolf up next, asking, so it's being reported that the Dodgers were offering Gavin Lux and parts for Devin Williams. Am I nuts for preferring a package that centered around Gavin Lux and pieces over a Nestor Cortes and a 5'5" Caleb Durbin? Excuse me, Devin, he's 5'6". Or do you think the Brewers did the right deal? So, this is something that kind of came up in our G chat amongst us and Spencer, where I don't know what it is other than Gavin Lux being from Wisconsin, but he's been rumored to the Brewers for like 4 years now. People seem to still be like pining for that. He hasn't necessarily turned out great in the majors so far. Part of that, he hasn't had consistent playing time. He's been hurt a lot. But I guess, Paul, would you have preferred that deal over what the Brewers did get?
So a lot of that is going to depend on other things, I think, more than anything. And it's hard to judge in a vacuum. I think Gavin Lux can be a useful major league player, and he does offer some of the versality kind of that they like to have.
He's more of a second baseman. He's pretty much
more of a second baseman.
Yeah,
he can do other things. But he's not good. Like, it doesn't really move the needle. And I will tell you this: I am always skeptical of the desire to get the guy who happens to be from the area that you play in. I don't really think the Brewers are stupid enough. Like, this is a Bears thing for me. The Bears spent a long time like overly scouting areas around them and the Midwest, and getting Notre Dame players they shouldn't, and getting Northern Illinois players they shouldn't. And like, it is like the Bears are good for extremes, but I'm always skeptical of that for that reason. But like, he's fine. I would have been like, I understand it. They can maybe make this work a little bit, but I don't really like either of those deals, the Cortes one or this one. So I feel about the same. If they had they done that, I would feel about the same, depending on what they got in addition.
You would have to have gotten a hell of a lot in addition for me to like it more, because Cortes actually does have legitimate impact upside that I don't think. I mean, I guess technically Lux was worth 2.7 WAR in 2022, but he was worth a 1.5 last year. Like, Cortes is more of an ability to impact at an area they have need, right? He can impact in an area of need in a way that this doesn't. And Lux is a 2-year rental. he is going to be a free agent after 2 more years. So there's that also. Like, he would be a rental,
which is one more year than Cortes.
which is 1 more year than Cortes, but it's also at a position like you're already pretty, stocked at second base.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a need for them. So yeah.
I will say, if people really wanted Gavin Lux because he's from Wisconsin, Caleb Durbin is from Lake Forest, Illinois, less than an hour away from American Family Field. So there you go.
That's not the same thing at all, James. He's on the other side of the border there.
He's on the wrong side of the line. Yes,
Yeah,
I
wrong side of
understand,
the line.
but he's local-ish. I saw it being reported. Fan was actually his closest major league park growing up. So there you go. Luke Zimmerman's asking about the bullpen configuration now post Devin. So Luke's question here is, with Williams traded, how would you expect the key roles in the Brewers bullpen to be arranged for 2025, including closer, backup closer / setup man, other high leverage pitcher A, other high leverage pitcher B? Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is all going to be flexible. It will change over time. I will say, I think that as it stands right now, McGill is your pretty obvious, like, you will give him the 9th and see how that goes to start. I think that's fairly obvious. As far as other guys that I see being in the leverage chain to start the year, as long as they're healthy and their stuff doesn't look terrible in spring training, I think Koenig and Piamps are both guys who I could see in the leverage chain to start the year. But then there's just a billion guys. You could go down to Yoho and Miz. The Miz probably not early because I think they still want to try to start him, which is smart, and they should try to do that. But there's just a bunch of other guys that could potentially. Abner Uribe is a guy that we need to consider, because before he was hurt, he was looking like an absolute monster for them. And there's still stuff that has to get straightened out there. Or
Needs to serve a suspension. Yes.
He needs to serve a suspension. Yeah. But he is really significant. We thought he was going to be the Brewers closer. And like early last year, we were like, oh yeah, he's already like now taking over the closer role to start in New York. Like, we thought that was what was happening before all of the unpleasantness. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of moving and shaking in this, because there always is, because there's bullpen, and it's just, that's how it goes.
Yep. The only thing I'll add to that is I'll bet Nick Mears has a bigger role than everybody is expecting, and they like his stuff, and will probably get some opportunities in high leverage as well.
Yep. He is definitely in that grouping. That's why they got him, was they liked his ability. Yep. He was definitely part of this group. We could sit here and name guys for like 20 minutes. I mean, Brian Hudson.
Yeah.
Like,
I think mostly it's McGill is at the top until he fails, and everybody else is slotting in behind as long as they keep succeeding.
Yep, exactly. And they'll slide up as warranted, because that's how bullpens work.
All right, one last question related to the Devin Williams trade before we get to other stuff. Ian Pomplin asking, what are the chances that the Brewers use the Devin Williams cash for something stupid along the lines of X-Golf? Laser tag, ? Instead of spending the money on players and salaries. So as we mentioned, $2 million going to the Brewers. I don't know, Paul. I feel like this is just like Nestor Cortes arbitration insurance, but what do you think?
It's that, and X-Golf doesn't cost money. X-Golf makes money. They don't have that there as a funsy thing just to throw money away. People are always at X-Golf. Have you walked by X-Golf? It's always packed. Like, they're doing fine on X-Golf. So yeah, the $2 million, they might waste it some other way, but it won't be on that. Yeah, it's probably just insurance for that. Exactly.
Yeah, here's the thing about money, is it all spends the same. So whatever you take the next $2 million that they spend on whatever and say, oh,
Yeah.
that's the cash they got for Devin Williams. Like, it all spends the same. So if you want to be happy, you could say, oh, well, it's $2 million on a thing I liked. Oh, that was $2 million spent to get that guy who I like. Or if you want to be mad, you could say, if they do a transaction you don't like, you can say, well, that's $2 million they spent on that. They're wasting that Devin Williams cash. So this is, money spends the same.
Yep.
All right. After 45 minutes of Devin Williams talk, other things to talk about. The winter meetings saw a few things happen for the Brewers. They signed a lefty minor league free agent named Grant Wolfram to a major league deal, ensuring he has a place on the 40-man roster. Besides the unbelievably awesome name, Ryan, what should we know about Man Wolfram?
Yeah, so he is. Oh, yeah. Also, great. Yes, that was excellent photoshopping by you. I cracked me up
Thank you.
as soon as I saw that.
Thank you.
That was wonderful. So I'm just gonna kind of crib off of what True Blood wrote about this because it was pretty funny. It was like, well, he's 6'8", he's a lefty, and he throws 96. So can I interest
He's Brian
you
Hudson too.
Yeah, and the fact that they gave him, and actually he's Blake Perkins part 2, because the fact that they took a career minor leaguer and gave him a big league contract suggests that they are pretty high on him and they think they can get some real utility and use out of him. He's a guy that obviously he could. Don't be surprised if he ends up, if they figure out, what they need to do to improve him and whatever, if they do that, because Texas isn't the greatest pitching development. I don't think they're terrible anymore. I think they've gotten better, but they're not the greatest pitching development. I could see them really getting something out of him and like him turning into probably not this year's version of Brian Hudson, because Hudson was, unbelievably good for those first 3 months or whatever, before the injuries and the regression set in. But I wouldn't be surprised if he was sort of a, wow, that guy's really, really good. You kind of know that what they think of him by virtue of the fact that they were willing to give him a major league deal. So kind of keep an eye on that. There could really be something here.
At the winter meetings, there's also a rumor that the Brewers were at least one of the last teams involved in the Garrett Crochet sweepstakes before he ultimately ended up being traded by the White Sox to the Red Sox. Adam McCalvy was reporting that they were serious suitors for Crochet before he went to Boston, and, quote, it would have hurt in terms of prospect capital. So I guess, Paul, that at least raises some interesting questions. He would have been another rental before a big free agent deal, ultimately going to Boston. I guess, what do you imagine that deal could have looked like, and what would the motivation be?
They're clearly looking for starting pitching, I guess, more than anything, and willing to pay for
frontline starting pitcher. Yeah.
I'm actually surprised to hear they were that into Crochet, and mostly because they don't they've had Woodruff, they've had Burns, they've had good starting pitchers, but it also seems to be something they can deal. They are comfortable dealing on the cheap with pitchers, and they could use more hitting. So every time I hear something like this, even the Nestor trade, honestly, kind of surprises me. And the fact that they were willing to give up apparently good prospects is genuinely surprising to me, especially because he would just be a rental. What that would have looked like, that I'm not sure about. And Peter but if it was like Miz or Yoho involved, that would be more surprising, but we don't know. That's the thing. Like, Hurts to McCalvy may not be the same as Hurts to us. We rank guys differently sometimes. But I think it's weird that they are seemingly so in to paying for starting pitching. I think that is the strangest thing about this whole thing. And maybe speaks to some confidence in the development going on with, like, Mizorowski, maybe with Woodruff's recovery. And maybe there is some intel to be garnered out of this fact on what's going on in terms of recovery and development down low and their level of confidence with it.
Yeah, it is definitely intriguing. And that's kind of, I wanted to make sure we got this in here because it raises a lot of questions. But bottom line, and I put this on Blue Sky, and basically my thought process on this is, we couldn't have been that close to actually pulling this off. Like, they may have made what they view in their minds as a serious offer, but in terms of actually getting close to beating the Red Sox deal, I can't see it, because basically if you're going to beat the best, or if you're going to beat that Red Sox offer, the best piece in it is Kyle Teal, and the only player the Brewers have that you can kind of theoretically say is like better than Kyle Teal is Jesus Mate. And there's no way they were giving up Jesus Mate. I refuse to believe that there's any universe where they even considered that. So I feel like it was probably a deal headlined by maybe Caro or Miz, Pratt potentially being in there. But then you would have had to start stacking those guys. And I still don't know that based on what the Red Sox gave up, where they gave up two kind of legitimate-ish top 50 prospects in Teal and Montgomery, right? Montgomery, I think, was the second piece of that.
Yeah.
I don't think the Brewers beat that without including Mate. So I don't think they were that close. I just don't believe they were that close to actually beating it.
All right. Real quick, we also saw the Rule 5 draft happen at the end of the winter meetings. As always, the Brewers lost Shane Smith in the very first pick of the draft to the White Sox, but they also picked up a lefty pitcher, Connor Thomas, from the Cardinals. Thomas doesn't throw very hard, but has a significant ground ball rate in his career. I guess, Rule 5 picks, always a question on if they can stash them on the major league roster the entire year. Ryan, the bullpen's crowded, as we mentioned. I don't know if he makes it the entire way, but what do you think?
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting one because the Brewers did also lose the number one player in the Rule 5 draft in Shane Smith, and Spencer kind of tipped us off to that Shane Smith was sort of a guy that was rising in the esteem of people. And so that's kind of a tricky one that they ended up losing him. And honestly, I think I would prefer that they had just put Shane Smith on and not taken Connor Thomas. Like, I think that's my preference that they would have done it. Now, that's not a completely fair comparison because that is working with the hindsight knowledge that we have now that Smith was going to be valued highly and was going to go, and that Connor Thomas was going to be, I guess, the best player that they could get. They couldn't have known those things. There may have been a player that they liked more than Thomas that they thought they could get in the Rule 5 who ended up going ahead of them. And when they made that decision, I'm sure they didn't think that Shane Smith was definitely going to be taken by somebody. Though you do wonder if maybe McKinven had some input on that, right? Where he said, "Hey, front office,
absolutely,
I have seen this kid throw, and you want this. It's worth going and doing it." So you do wonder if maybe that was played a role in this, but we don't know. That's just pure speculation. I will say this: Connor Thomas has definitely the Hobie Milner starter kit. Like he's got that. So that is a thing. You look at him, and one of the things that stands out is pretty low walk rates. His walk rates are, in the 2s and the 1s. Not huge strikeout rates, but kind of there. I think the difference between the strikeout and the walk rates, like that's what Connor Thomas has.
All right. We do have a Patreon question about the Rule 5 draft. Mark Podscarby asking, since the Brewers left Shane Smith unprotected, but went on to draft another pitcher, should we take that to mean that the Brewers were lower on Shane Smith than the consensus? Paul, I know a few years ago you had this theory where if you have the number one guy in the Rule 5 draft taken, probably messed up somewhere along the line. Is that where you fall on this one?
It is, especially because they did make their own draft of a pitcher later on, as we've just discussed. I will say one caveat. So, yes, you never want to have that. That is an indicator that you should have kept that player, moved them up. However, I will have one caveat here. I have a sub-caveat for the caveat, which is the White Sox are dumb. And so in irrational markets, sort of the average intelligence of everybody all around makes it so, you should have probably elevated that guy. However, the White Sox are like one of the worst organizations in the history of baseball, or were last year. That's caveat too. Like, they realized they were horrible and are trying to change things around now. So maybe not as dumb as they once were. But yeah, you never want to have a player taken first overall here. You really don't. The only excuse for that is if you are just so stacked that you don't have room for a guy like this. And maybe you can make the case that is the case for them pitching wise, except they then went and picked a pitcher in the Rule 5 draft. So not the case. So yes, in terms of just efficiency of your organization, it's not the greatest thing in the world.
Any other thoughts, Ryan? I feel like, if we want to bring up the history, the only other time in recent history that the Brewers lost somebody was Miguel Diaz, taken number one by the Twins in what did we say? 2014? It's almost 10 years ago. 2016, almost 10 years ago now. And he was immediately traded to the Padres. That was a unique case because I think he had never pitched above like high A, but had like incredible strikeout stuff. And then kind of went on to have a middling career. So, these things can also not matter very much at all, too, in the long range.
Yeah, I mean, and it's still going on. His career is still going on, but yeah, he never turned into the player that we feared we were losing in that, which is instructive. The main thing to remember about the Rule 5 draft is that ever since, it's not the Rule 5 draft that used to be back when like the Twins got Johan Santana in it, because baseball has moved back the time when you have to make a decision on guys and put them on the 40. It used to be a year shorter than it is now. And so that gives teams that much more time to evaluate, and teams are just better at evaluating prospects now than they used to be. So it's rare that true impact ends up getting grabbed in the Rule 5 draft, and that there isn't like a bunch of other machinations in there. Like Shane Smith may become good, but it may also be for, the third team he's on after the White Sox. Hell, it could be for the Brewers if they bring him back in 3 years or something. So the way that the Rule 5 draft works, it's not the potential place to get impact talent that it used to be. And honestly, baseball would probably do well to bump it back a year, but of course they don't want to do that because that would it's also a player leverage thing. Players love it because it gets you to the big leagues, and baseball doesn't want to give players leverage. That's like the opposite of what they always want to do.
All right. Real quick, I wanted to talk about Kyle Tucker getting traded to the Cubs, but we're running long, so we can just do that another week or when we do the Cubs preview. But big trade there, also affecting the NL Central. Let's wrap up with our other Patreon questions and other questions from other sources this week. Keith Keskinen asking, I think it's safe to assume that Durbin isn't the solution at third base. Does adding another short, fast, soft contact guy make the likelihood of improving third base with a package of younger players around Sal Frelick more likely? Is Alec Boehm off the table? I know he's from Philly. He's one that Brewers fans maybe were looking at in terms of a Devin Williams trade. I don't know how realistic that was. Philly's contending. He's very good, Paul. But I guess how would you go about still improving third base here?
I mean, he's one of the options, but as I will mention, they won't do it. But you just go get Bregman and fix that whole thing. But they won't because he cost $1 zillion. Alec Boehm's one of the few options you have if you can coax him away, I suppose. But the bottom line is there's not a lot of good options out there that aren't going to cost you something. And he's probably the best one that's plausible at the moment. So I'm not sure if Sal gets included in a lot of trades. Maybe this is just me not liking him and I'm underrating his market, but I wouldn't be giving out a lot of money for a fast guy with the 1% profile of power hitting. That's just me. But he would be a good option. Alec Boehm isn't great, but he is a solidly average to slightly above average third baseman, which is all I really want for that position. So he's only 28. That would be totally fine. I am down with that. And there's not really like a better plausible option out there, especially as a free agent that won't cost $1 zillion. So that would be fine.
Yeah, Boehm, I don't know that Sal could get that done. That's
no way. Not alone anyway.
Well, I mean, you're talking about 5 years of control versus 2 years of control for Boehm. So there's like asymmetry there. That's
true.
A spot. But I just don't know if they have the need in the outfield because they actually have like good outfield. They've gotten better. The Phillies, you remember a couple years ago, they were a softball team, and now actually they're kind of good defensively, which is part of why like Boehm is not a great defender at third base. He's actually more of a liability that way than anything else. But yeah, no, I'm to the Bregman thing because there was some reporting this week on the Bregman situation. So just to put a finer point on why it's super unlikely, Bregman apparently spit on 6/160 from the Astros. Because he thinks he can get like over $200 million. And he's on the wrong side of 30. So like that's going to, I get the feeling that the Yankees are looking at him. The Red Sox are looking at him. It's that sort of, we're talking about that sort of market, and he's going to get a huge bag for the thing. And he already was slipping last year. You look at what he did. His walk rate really tumbled last year, which is very curious. And you don't kind of know why that would be. So yeah, Bregman's going to get huge bank. And it's almost certainly going to be a bad contract. So yeah.
New this morning, as we record this on Sunday morning, MLB.com reporting the Mets are interested in Alex Bregman. So there you go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Steve Cohen
Jeffrey
gets what Steve
Amenecker.
Cohen wants. Yeah.
Jeffrey Amenecker, our next question this week, saying Rosenthal's reporting the Brewers are looking to move Rhys Hoskins. Seems unlikely anyone would spring for him. Supposedly, they'd have to attach a prospect. I hate the idea of that. And if they moved him, who's playing first? Tyler Black? Yelich? Seems bad all around unless they can truly dump him easily and find a clear replacement. Well, I don't know. The Angels seem to be involved in every old guy who can hit a little bit. Paul, what do you think?
I just don't think that there's going to be a huge market for him. This strikes me as the typical the Brewers checked in on X, kind of the opposite though. I'm sure that they are shopping kind of everyone all the time to various extents, and I'm sure Hoskins is a guy they would naturally go and inquire to teams about if there's any interest out there, because he did disappoint and he costs a fair amount of Brewer money. And if they could do something to change that up, they probably would. But I just don't think there's going to be a lot of interest until teams see if he rallies back and the bat comes back a little bit. So, maybe somebody tries to get the rebound year, kind of like Winker's rebound year. Maybe that happens and you can move on from that money. But I think this is just a report of the Brewers doing due diligence and not anything other than that.
Yeah, I'm reading the Rosenthal bit now, and basically he notes that there's a lot of guys who you could sort of, if you don't get Rhys Hoskins, there's a lot of guys you could potentially get for less money than him. He runs down, it's not just Alonso and Christian Walker, but there's also Paul Goldschmidt, Anthony Rizzo, Josh Bell, Carlos Santana, Justin Turner. Like, there's a bunch of guys who, if you don't want to pay the cost that it would take to get Hoskins, that you would, you'd be perfectly fine with this. So this just seems like them doing due diligence, like Paul said.
All right. Cheese Cavarici, our last Patreon question this week, asking, I'm sure if it's too late to get this question in, but would you please refresh our collective memory? How does Robert Gasser's injury, rehab, and IL time affect his service time? Ryan, any insights on that one?
Yeah, it is service time. He's on the major league injured list. Change that. It's in the major league injured list. So all this counts against his service time. So basically his clock started ticking last year in May when he came up, and it will tick all the way through this, which means that assuming he doesn't go back down again, basically 2024 will be his year 0 because you won't have accrued a full year of service time. 2025 will be his first year. So that would put 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Wait, it would make him a free agent after. Oh yeah. I forgot a thumb there. Okay. It would make him a free agent after 2030. So you just got to hear me do math on my fingers on a podcast. That's a new low for me. That's great.
Remember to carry the thumb.
The thumb. Remember to carry the thumb.
We do have an email question real quick to end the episode here from Mad Irish Frog, who's asking, I know this is a dream and not going to happen. So Ryan, disclaimer up front, knows it's a dream and not going to happen. But Roki Sasaki's agent said he did not have the best relationship with the Japanese media and might want to go to a smaller market team in the short run to avoid the media spotlight. Beyond the Brewers' known capabilities at building pitchers, I'm also responded to the Wisconsin media's complete abrogation of their role. I seem to remember a star quarterback standing up during a global pandemic, and when questioned if he'd gotten the vaccine, responded, yeah, I've been immunized. And no journalist in the state was like, that's a funny way to phrase that. Do you mean something other than vaccinated? That went on for weeks. If you want a cushy media city, Milwaukee's not bad. Love the show. So, Ryan, stated up front, not going to happen, but it is kind of interesting that the Roki Sasaki representation, at least at the winter meeting, seemed to indicate that, don't assume it's the Dodgers, because apparently speculation about the Dodgers in Japan is what got him so fed up with the media there. But I guess your thoughts on where Roki ends up and whether it could be a small, quote unquote, smaller market.
Yeah, small market in this case refers to San Diego and Seattle. I think we're not talking about the Brewers, and I think it's fair to point out Kurt was actually talking about this. Kurt Hogue was talking about this on the Microbrews podcast with JR. they were talking about this a little bit in terms of like market size and just the media spotlight, just because going to certain places, there's so many more reporters and everybody's fighting to get a scoop. Everybody's fighting to get like that attention and that sort of thing. When you're in Milwaukee and there's just not that many reporters around, there's less of a feeding frenzy around stuff, and the pressure doesn't get ratcheted up the same way here. So like, yes, playing for the Milwaukee Brewers, you are not going to have the same media the same media attention, the same focus on you the way that you would if you are in a bigger market. That's just like a truism, and it just does make sense. But it's also not really a great reason. I don't think part of the deal is the reason he got such intense media scrutiny, from my understanding, is Roki Sasaki was what is the name of that big tournament that they do in high school when you're like,
oh, I don't know the name of it. I don't know what you're talking about, but yeah, Japan's got a huge,
right? It's Koshien, I think is what it's called.
Something like that. Yeah.
His media attention sort of stems from that, and the fact that he was like a superstar young and early, and that they have been careful. His team has been careful to protect his health. And there's been a lot of old man griping about like him not being willing to like, go to the mat and pitch a lot, like it's been that sort of
140 pitches kind of thing, which is not uncommon in Japan.
Right. Yeah. That they've been protecting him and have been careful. And there's also some stuff that there's a feeling there that he had a deal in place, that part of his willingness to sign was that he was going to be put as a free agent early. And in Japan, it is understandable. People do not want to see their guys go sort of earlier than they need to. I think people kind of let it go with Ohtani because it was such an extraordinary case. And so they're like, yeah, fine, you're 23 or whatever, and you want to go over there. Okay, you're Ohtani. But for the most part, they don't want to see their guys like pick up and come over here earlier than they need to. And so there's some like tension there as a reason for this, which I think some of that stuff, even if he comes to the US, even if he was in New York or in LA or like big feeding frenzy media markets, he wouldn't be getting that same sort of attention, because it's just about issues that wouldn't necessarily port over to here. The reasons people got upset at him were not things that are necessarily going to be relevant once he's here, is basically what I'm saying there. So I don't know how much that actually matters.
We'll keep an eye on that, but yeah, I'm with you. I think San Diego, the most likely scenario, at the winter meetings, his agent was like, the checklist is good pitching development, contender, has members of the Japanese World Baseball Classic team on them, and that kind of thing. And, Yu Darvish, as we mentioned, still on the Padres, a legend amongst Japanese pitchers. So, that seems likely. If you want to pitch with somebody who is on that team and don't want to pitch in LA, San Diego is the next best bet, I think. All right. That'll do it for questions this week. Thank you, everybody, for sending those in. A reminder, patreon.com/MKE tailgate. $2 a month is all it costs to get your question read here and on reporting as eligible. Even if you're not a patron, you can support us for free in another way. If you haven't already, go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you're listening to us, and give us a 5-star review there if you could. And while you're there, please be sure to subscribe to make sure you don't miss an episode throughout the off season. So busy week here. Ryan, what do you got for business?
Yeah, we don't have any new patrons to shout out. I looked, and we don't have any of that. I did want to throw something in there, though, because I remembered I wanted to say it. And if you want a guy that's going to potentially move Joey Ortiz back to third and off of short, Ha-Sung Kim is your guy. Like, that still, I think, is potentially in play. There's injury concern there, and so that might tamp down his market a little bit. But he seems like a guy who could potentially be in the Brewers' range of something that they would do. But we're going to have to give it some time. Like, that's not a thing the Brewers would do now. That's a thing the Brewers would do in, like, February. So you're going to have to be patient on something like that. But I wanted to throw it out there.
There we go. Is he your Reese Hoskins of this offseason where you're just pining for that for weeks, and we'll see if it happens? I don't know.
I think
it'd be a good fit.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons that is a good fit. It really is, because he's a good defender. He does offer some pop. Like it's obviously not it's not Willy Adames pop. Like that, you're not going to find that.
Right.
But it is some pop, and so I think there's something you could do with that. So yeah, just keep an eye on Ha-Seong Kim. Like potentially a guy.
We'll keep an eye on that and any other Brewers news that might come out in the next week. That'll do it for this week, everyone. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time here on Milwaukee's Tailgate. Have a good week and stay well, everyone.